and we turn our attention to the economic freedom fighters' national shutdown yesterday. Some people say there wasn't much of a shutdown. Perhaps a protest would be more appropriate to describe what happened there. And some 550 protesters arrested for various crimes, the authorities have told us. Now, party leader Julius Malema has described the protest as, quote-unquote, the most successful in history, while Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, labeling it a monumental failure. Let's get some analysis now, and we'll speak to Professor Zwelinzima Ndevu, and he's a political analyst joining us all the way from Cape Town. Professor Ndevu, good morning to you. You have heard those two descriptions from the man of the moment. He says this has been the most successful in history, while the government of the day says it was a monumental failure. Where do you stand?
Good morning, Polly, and good morning to your listeners. I think one must remember that this was the start of a revolution. And I think in those standards, really, people did not turn out in the numbers that the EFF expected. There was no disruption, or if there was disruption, there was very minimal disruption that we've seen in daily lives of people. The marches, the people that came out to protest were fewer in numbers than we expected. The anarchy that is always associated with people that protest under the EFF banner was not there, was absent. So in that sense, I think in my view, that was not a successful protest. You would remember that Mr. Malema said that they only have control on the day, which was yesterday, and that protest might continue over a number of days, or it might spill over to today, and we have not seen that. So in that sense, in their standards, really it was not a success. But we also must appreciate that the EFF got only 10% of the votes in the national election, and pulling out over 3,000 people in the capital city, that is maybe something of significance that they can talk about. But I don't think it's a nationwide success. Certainly not.
Professor Ndevu, let's talk about drawing attention to the issues that they put up. And top of that list was the issue of electricity. Do you think that that has gotten more attention than, I suppose, we have been talking about since the start of this year? In fact, we'll talk about the President Cyril Ramaphosa. That was another call. Added to that, the issue of unemployment. But let's start with electricity. Any more attention you think has been brought sharply into this issue?
It's certainly the fact that people are despondent, the fact that people in majority are complaining about the service that is provided by Eskom. Any voice that adds to that is a voice that is important. So bringing that to the fore, rallying people around that, rallying South Africans around that would also make government to move with speed. So it would create some sense of agency. That is something that any political party would do and succeed in doing. So it certainly put that back in the spotlight, and unfortunately did not rally all sectors of society around the EFF on that issue. But it's certainly an important issue that was brought.
I'll come to the President Ramaphosa matter about him, the demand for him to step down. But let's touch on unemployment. I heard one of the speakers addressing there, one of the alliance partners, if you like, standing up and saying that they are disappointed that some of the people, particularly young people that they would have expected to be part of this protest, they were not participating. Instead, they were standing in windows of their apartments and, I suppose, rallying the EFF protesters on. Is that something perhaps to talk about, that they didn't necessarily get the kind of attention that the EFF would have hoped for?
Yes, remember, unemployment is very high. Government has admitted that this has become a serious challenge in the country. You've got a lot of young people that are unemployed, that there is no hope that in the near future they might be absorbed by the labor market unless something drastic is done. So that is something that should resonate with young people in the country. And if there is any call to protest that is centered around an issue of that nature, you expect young people to follow suit and join in that call. But we must also indicate that the police, in the manner in which they handle this particular protest, the visibility of the police, ensuring that in each and every street you have a police van, you have a police present, that deterred people that would ordinarily have been part of that strike. Because you would know that any protest that has EFF, it ends up in violence or there is provocation of law enforcement officers. So I assume many young people that resonate with that call were also thinking about their safety. And what would happen if there was somebody who provoked the law enforcement agencies.
Yeah. Then let's talk about the call for President Cyril Ramaphosa to step down. Talk to me about whether or not the EFF has started something here that we are going to continue to see, because Julius Malema did say at one point during the march that, remember that we have declared that Ramaphosa will not see or will not experience peace anymore, given that, in their view, he has violated his oath of office, and therefore the obsession of the EFF is going to make him uncomfortable, or as uncomfortable as is possible wherever he appears.
Yes, this is not a new call. We remember that in November they made the same call. In Parliament in February, when the President presented the State of the Nation, the same call was made. So we would know that they have a history of sustaining calls of this nature with former President Zuma. So that would be an issue that President Ramaphosa must know he would live with it in his presidency. What maybe should be done is to ensure that the President and law enforcement agencies expedite the issue of Pala to ensure that they move any doubt in the President's head around his credibility and his integrity. If that is not done, we will still hear Mr. Malema and the EFF continuing with this campaign to unseat sitting President.
Then let's talk politics, Professor Ndevu, because some of the writings in the lead up to this national shutdown, as the EFF billed it, some of the writers have said that this is the attempt by the EFF to make it relevant, or to make itself relevant again to society, given the upcoming elections in 2024. Do you think that they have managed to do that? And if so, will it necessarily translate into tangible votes come 2024?
I think any political observer can see that this is linked to a launch of an election campaign. This rally was to test the ordinary South Africans as to what are the issues that resonate with them more and what are the issues that resonate with them less, in order to build up momentum to whenever they would launch their political manifesto for the election. So it is clear that the EFF is trying to rally people around all corners of the country behind the party going to next year's election. We have seen what they have done in local municipalities, where they have now started to take center stage and want to be recognized or be part of the power establishment wherever they are in coalition. As to whether that would resonate with our people, that's another issue. I think our people are not only convinced by rhetorics, but they want to see programs of action. So it will depend on what kind of program EFF comes up with to address the issue of unemployment, to address the issue of electricity, to address the issue of declining economy, so, and amongst other things. So if they don't develop a concrete program that talk to these issues, a program on how they deal with coalition governments in the event that there is no party that gets majority, if they don't have proper plans, the rhetoric that they are using would not attract any votes, especially from their non-traditional votes.
Yeah. Let's wind down our conversation, Professor Ndevu, and I want to conclude it on this point, and that is that there has been mixed views, mixed opinion about the reaction of the government of the day to this protest. So the one view says, with the July 2021 unrest in mind, the police did what they needed to do in order to avoid anarchy in the country. Then there are those who are saying that this was overreaction, putting the army on standby. In fact, the night before the actual protests, the president telling Parliament that there has been a deployment of thousands of members of the South African National Defence Force. Did the state overreact here? And if they did, why is it that they would marshal so much resources when at the moment the country is gripped by ongoing assassinations that do not seem to be resolved?
I think only one must remember that in July unrest, many people lost their life. There was looting, there was anarchy in the country, which had a potential of topping a democratically elected government. And there was a lot of criticism of government not being present, of security apparatus not taking charge of the situation and combating the spread of that looting that we saw, where communities had to stand up and protect themselves. What we have seen yesterday was a cooperation between government, community establishments such as policing forums, neighborhood watch, and society in general, in saying that everybody has a right that is entrenched in the Constitution to protest, but that right must be exercised with caution, and person must take responsibility and ensure that they protest in a legal format, they do not infringe on other people's rights. So in that sense, I think we should applaud government for having a plan in motion and ensuring that they put that plan in motion. Have the security apparatus not have a plan, their presence could in itself have caused anarchy, but they handled themselves very well. They were not provocative to the protesters, allowed them space to protest, actually escorted them and shielded them to protest in a more legal form and under the laws. So that it must be something that is commended. We don't want to see anarchy, and certainly nobody wants to say that. And government reacted in a manner that one expects. I think many of us slept peacefully without worrying the night before the protest, seeing a number of police that are there. One would hope that government would continue to deploy some of the resources that they've deployed yesterday in all areas to ensure that there is peace and security, and these hits that you have talked about are reduced drastically with the visibility of police in our communities.
Political analyst, Professor Zwelinzima Ndevu, let me thank you very much for your time and analysis of that EFF protest. They termed it a shutdown. Well, Professor Ndevu does seem to suggest that it wasn't much of a success in terms of a shutdown.